All right, so my next guest is Jeremy Sherman, Ph.D., MPP, GED, to know ourselves better through cradle-to-grave scientific research, he says. Hold on for this conversation. It was fantastic. We blew through an hour and a half. I felt like we could have gone for another hour and a half. He's author of the book Neither Ghost Nor Machine. He also started up, he's writing his new book. At the same time, he creates a podcast, and he's calling it a pod class. What's Up with A-Holes? Advanced Psycho-proctology for Beginners. That's what he calls it. I've got all the links in his website and everything in the show notes. We started this conversation just kind of without really starting, so we just dove right into it. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did, as always, and see you next time. Thank you for getting up so early for this conversation. That's awesome.
Not a problem.
You, where are you at exactly?
I'm in Berkeley, California.
Oh, cool. I'm from
and you're California. In Germany, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What brought you there?
My wife is originally we live in this little village called, it's called, like, I guess you would say it in English, it's like Pasewalk, Pasewalk. It's a little tiny province in East Germany, old East Germany, and that's where we live now with 3 kids. Because she's a pharmacist. She ended up taking over her father's pharmacy. And it's in this village too. So it's the financial support of this pharmacy kind of kept us here in this province. I'm kind of jealous of you because I'm originally from California, and hearing that you're in Berkeley, and I've obviously been to Berkeley thousands of times, and I get a little homesick when I hear that.
Well, were you in Northern California or Southern?
Northern California. I'm originally from Auburn.
From where?
Auburn, California. On the way up to Tahoe. Nice. Yeah. I'm kind of kicking myself a little bit. I didn't do as much research as I wanted to do.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
Right. No, but I'm realizing like there's so much stuff to get into with you. I was like,
I don't know what the theme of this interview is.
Right.
But that's fine.
Well, it's a good thing to figure out. Neither Ghost Nor Machine. You wrote that back in
2017.
Okay. Do you have a newer book out that you want to talk about, or is that the last one?
Not out yet, but yes, in a way, I do have it out already. It's I've got it out as a pod class. The way I decided to write this to do my final edits on this podcast were on this book were to write it as a pod class, and it's on a topic I call psycho-proctology, which is the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of assholery. So my research it's my middle-age spread. It goes all the way from origins of life to our grave situation, and not in a hand-wringing or angst-driven kind of way. It's research. So I'm particularly keen on the topic of assholes and cults these days. There are reasons there are obvious reasons why one would focus there, it seems to me. So anyway, that's some of my more recent research. I cover a lot of ground. I've got 8 big research questions, and if you wanted a quick look at a summary of what they are, just go to jeremysherman.com.
Okay.
And you'd find the 8 questions that I deal with. In my research and in my research collaborations.
And you're doing this as a pod class. So what is that? I've never heard of it. Is it like basically a podcast that you're breaking down into different or how what is that?
Yeah. No, I assumed that someone else had coined that term. I have a tendency to coin a lot of terms. I've coined over 1,500 terms, not for things that for mostly for phenomena that doesn't have a name yet, though I think that a name would be useful for it. So I also have a podcast called To Name It Is to Tame It, terms for reading between the lines with greater comprehension. But anyway, Podclass, I assumed was a name already out there. It's just it's a podcast that it's a limited series,
right?
That reads a little bit like a class. And part of this was me trying to get over my own me working to get over whatever writers. It's not so much writer's block as writer's meandering. Was I realized that I could write the book, I could make the book sneak up on me by writing it as a course, as a course. So so the book ended up being like that. It's and so yeah, the podcast is just a 15 episode podcast that is the whole book, me reading it cover to cover, and the book will be out soon.
Cool. All right, so we'll definitely talk about that. Like, just basically, I don't want to make you repeat it yourself, but basically.
Oh, no, totally fine. Yeah. I repeat myself all the time. Comes with the territory.
Yeah. Yeah,
like that's advertising if you're in that business. But right. I'm a gentleman scholar is what I am. That is, I live off of investments and have chosen to use my discretionary time, of which there's a lot, on writing and researching. And I have great colleagues to do it with. Legitimate scientists who I work with, and it's been a joy and has given me all this time to think about things and write them up.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's nice that you're able to that you're able to have that free room, and then that you use it for something. For someone like me, that has really no formal education, this is like my podcast is my informal way of learning, So I get
it is a great way to learn.
It is. That's why I'm so excited about this type of conversation when I get someone who's in direct contact with it. But I'll probably say that in the show too. But can I then just take these when I go to your website and I said what is trying and how did it start, how to spot and stop assholes? These are the 8 questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we can I can use that as a way to go through the conversation, right?
Yeah, though to get to all 8 of them,
it's too much.
They're all of a piece to me. They're all completely related to each other. They're questions that follow from each other in a way.
Yeah.
But to cover all 8 of them in one session might be intense and too much for listeners. So up to you.
Well, I mean, gosh, I would then maybe I could come back to you another time.
Whatever. Yeah.
Because the thing that I caught on where I was left at was with your talk at Google that you had, and it really just gave me a question in my mind of what is he talking about here, right? So it seems at first it seems a little bit. And I can just play the dumb guy, and you can just explain to me
that's right.
Mattering matters, something like that.
Well, no, it's a simple question, but it's an unfamiliar one. So here you are, you're a self, right? And you're trying to do things, and you're trying to figure out what to do. And if you're like me, and I think like most people, those questions matter to you a lot. Yeah. That is what you are or who you are, your identity, how people see you, all of that stuff, and what you should do with yourself. But we rarely step back, if ever, and ask what are selves and what is trying. Chemicals aren't trying. Computers aren't trying. Machines don't try. And yet you do. And so do even trees. Trees are trying to stay alive. They don't just stand there. They're not just static. They have to hustle. They have to do work, which is effort, which is trying.
Right.
They have to do that in order to stay alive, because we'd all degenerate in no time if, just look at a corpse. It decomposes quickly.
Right.
So a simple example of how the kind of trying we're doing, obviously there's a trying we do cognitively, there's the trying we do emotionally, but today you produce 240 billion new cells. You did that today. You did that unconsciously, without feeling that you were doing it. You had no feeling of generating each of those cells, and yet that's you trying. So there's a core question in science that scientists, for the most part, ignore. They assume trying for living things, and they assume there's no trying for strictly physical things or inanimate things. So, for example, if you went into a physics course and the professor said that the moon pulls on the tides in order to achieve some effect. That is, it's trying to pull on the tides to achieve something. You'd think he was nuts. But down the hall, if you go to a biology class or a psychology class, they can talk about trying all the time. Well, what's the difference? To understand the difference between things that try and things that don't, our approach is to go to the very first trier. That is, we assume that there's no trying in astronomy. That stars aren't trying. That the first trying things are the first living beings. So that's how the origins of trying is the fundamental question in origins of life research. And no, it's not solved by evolutionary theory. Evolutionary theory explains how trying would change with changing circumstances, but it doesn't explain what trying is. And Darwin knew that. So anyway, that's that whole batch of research questions. And yeah, so I'm part of a team that has developed a simple, it would have to be simple because it's starting from nothing but simple chemistry, the first, how you would get the first self that is trying to keep itself going. That's how that work comes out.
Yeah. And exactly, like that's exactly where I was just trying to figure out, like, see, when you say neither ghost nor machine, and that's the title of that book that you wrote back then. So the theory is that, or I guess what the researchers have just left out, they left out like this huge spot in the middle on there. They just kind of like, they just went and they just assumed that trying is just what it is, and we're just going to leave that alone. We're not going to try and figure out what trying is. Trying is. But it seems like when you say that we all struggle, I mean, we all have, like, that's really relatable, right? Every person has a day or patches in life where you're like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Like you mentioned something about the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, right? Yeah. Just spinning your wheels. And I feel like
different from spinning your wheels.
Yeah.
The Red Queen is simply hustling in order to stay in place. She has to
stay in place.
Physical work in order to stay in place. Right. So it's not spinning our wheels necessarily. Obviously that's a huge question. It comes up, the first book I wrote was on doubt. I'm endlessly fascinated by doubt.
Yeah.
And what role it plays and how to manage it well, how to doubt well and not poorly. All of that's really interesting to me. But and a lot of doubt would be about, am I pissing in the wind? Is this just me spinning my wheels? But here I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about, for you to remain a self, you have to keep working. And why is that? Because things degenerate.
Yeah. Okay.
The most fundamental law in all of physics is that order becomes disorder. If you segregate things into nice patterns, you give it some time, the patterns will, in effect, melt. That's the second law of thermodynamics. That's what we call the increase in entropy. And so we're subject to that too. That's why I have to regenerate 240 billion cells today, because because 240 billion of my cells are going to degenerate.
Right.
Actually, 241 because I'm 65 years old. My cells are degenerating a little faster.
Yeah, I've noticed it too. I mean, it just I think when does it really start happening? Around age 25 or something like that. That's it. We're done creating. We degenerate more than we regenerate at a certain age.
Yeah, there's at least a notion out there. I haven't checked in a while whether it's still true. I have a feeling I've read some research recently that suggests it isn't, but it was an idea that your brain, your neurons stop. You don't get any new neurons after a certain age.
Oh yeah. That would be sad.
Yeah. But anyway, it's very clear. So this does relate to doubt and anxiety. I mean, one of the interesting psychological things that we humans are dealing with that other organisms don't seem to be dealing with is that we are the only organisms on Earth that can foresee in detail their inevitable death. That is, we're the only ones. We're stuck trying to figure out how to throw all into life, knowing that we will be thrown out.
Right.
That we're going to die. So this is this is a whole branch of psychological research that interests me. It's called terror management theory. It's about what happens to humans given that we know we're going to die. That everything you care about, everything you're trying to do, everything you want to do, at some point you're going to disappear. This is a wild thing to have to deal with. So we'd be an anxious species too. And that does relate to that whole other branch of my work. By the way, are we recording?
You know what? He started to, and I was like, well, since we're like, it's good that we are. He started to, and I was like, well, I'm gonna start this podcast like officially at some point. And I looked over to Eric as you were talking, and he's like, it's good, it's going, so it's cool.
Okay, good. All right,
you don't have to repeat all that.
That's right. Sounds good.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's the best. That's the fun of podcasting. You just keep it going.
Yes, it's true.
But to follow your thought, just back there where you're at with the Queen. For me,
Red Queen?
with the Red Queen, exactly.
Yeah.
So she has to hustle just to stay in check. So that's what you meant.
Just to stay in place. Yeah.
Just to stay.
To stay. Yeah.
Just to keep it. And I remember I had a coach in high school, a football coach, that would talk like that too. Like he said, like, because all the other teams that we're competing against, he's like, they're all pushing every day. So every day that you push, you're just keeping with those other teams.
Yes.
So like if you want to be better than them, you have to push twice as much, which is probably not possible. So you guys we're just probably going to be average like everybody else. And that was like how he left it. Kind of like he kind of was prodding us to work harder in the gym. And he's like, every time you put extra weight on, the team in Granite Bay is doing the same thing. Like, it was like this Granite Bay area up there in Northern California. And I just remember thinking to myself, back then I wasn't mentally ready for it. I was like, then I'm just not going to try,
Yes.
But some people kind of, like, and maybe now where I'm at now, that would kind of get me going. And when you talk about this, how do you play it out in a level of like, how can I bring that to the street? What you're saying? How can I,
sure.
How can I kind of, where does the rubber meet the road in your mind for always, I mean, I get it on the cellular level, right? But
But how does that apply to everyday life is what I think you're asking.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's what we mean by the rat race, in a way. And it can be discouraging, especially if what you were saying about 25-year-olds a minute ago applies psychologically. Like if you feel like no matter the best you can do is try to keep up, because at this point you're at a disadvantage against, let's say, the younger folk out there. That would be one example of it, though young folk feel this one a lot too. I mean, I remember in high school a sense that if I didn't hustle all day long, I wasn't even just going to keep up. But Darwin refers to this process as the struggle for existence. Mm-hmm. And so there's a clear distinction between, let's say, a piece of metal and you. You both look static. That is, you both look like stable things. But the chunk of steel is stable because it's durable. That is, it breaks down very slowly.
Right.
Over millennia, that thing would be gone. It rusts, for example. Okay, we rust too. That's why we have to take vitamin C. Vitamin C is protection against rust. It's right. Anti-rust.
You hear that, Eric? Vitamin C, man. I tell Eric to take his vitamin C. Sometimes I come into the office with little vitamin packets for it.
Yeah, so antioxidants are about anti-rusting. But the difference is that piece of steel exists by means of durability. It's just durable. Whereas we're really fragile. And you can tell when you see a dead body, it falls apart really quickly. No. So we are not being maintained by durability. We're being maintained by this ongoing hustle. And so I would say one fundamental for me at a street level is just to recognize what I am, setting aside all of the wishful thinking I could do, the cultural indoctrination, all of the assumptions I could make about it, and just to look at myself. I am a mid-sized mammal that has just in recent millennia gotten language. And language makes us a really weird creature,
Right.
really weird and really anxious and really escapist. And to just appreciate that, it's a kind of, um, I'm not much for mindfulness meditation. I think we can do better than that. I'm interested in a kind of you could say it's an anthropological introspection. That is just to see myself as what I am in the context of science, which for me is the most um, it it's the most credible source for possible explanations of what's going on. For me, it's science. I mean, I could start from any sacred text or any doctrine or whatever my father taught me or whatever. But if I want to look for a credible source, I think the scientific approach provides our best guesses. They're guesses. That's what I like about science, is that we make guesses, we make careful guesses that can be beat by future guesses. It's not some sacred eternal truth. And it's not just my intuitions. It's a system for grounding things and for grounding me as well. So personally, I take that into account. I think of myself, it's almost slapstick, this mid-sized mammal that's just got language. And it lightens me up in a way. It doesn't make me flippant. It doesn't make me cynical, but it does help me. The comedy or ironies of life peek through often in my life, and that gives me some peace of mind as I try to figure out what the hell to do.
It's
what
nice
to do with myself, what I am, what's the best use of me, how to best use what I'm dealt, that kind of thing.
It's nice to not be to take yourself so seriously. Like the way this, I love that part of like when you say that. It's kind of like I can see it for what it is. I don't have to be so pretentious about being a human. Like we're something so special, right? It's almost like
Yeah, though, and I also want to say we are special, and not just because I like us. I have very mixed feelings about us people.
Right.
Jerry Seinfeld says people are the worst, which is, I think, darling. But no, we are special because we have language. We are in a way, we're just a mid-sized mammal, but with the power of language, it radically changes how we live compared to how dogs and trees and other things live. I mean, just try this out as an example. Think about the list of things that your dog could worry about as it's falling asleep. Now compare that to the list of things that a human could worry about before falling asleep.
Right.
We would be anxious bunnies, and that's because we have language. With language, you can imagine all sorts of real and unreal, past, present, and future threats and opportunities.
Yeah.
And the opportunities include the anxiety of missed opportunities.
Right.
So, I mean, language makes a huge difference. And this is another thing that tends to get overlooked, even in the sciences. What a radical difference it makes that we have language.
There's so many points there. First, when I learned German, when I moved to Germany, I realized how I look at this aspect of language and emotion, the connection there. You mentioned something about doubt I'd like to get back to, but as you were talking about this rubber meets the road part of the question, it reminded me of a conversation with is his name Alex Huberman? I don't know his first name. He was on Joe Rogan the other day, and I think he's I'm not sure if is he. I think he's also in Berkeley somewhere there. Let me just look him up real quick. Huberman. He was talking about testosterone. Andrew Huberman, and he's talking about how it made sense to me in a sense. It kind of reminded me of exactly what you were talking about. That testosterone being released like in a neurological level, right? That you have this stress. And when you have a positive, like after a fight, you have they're talking about this UFC fight, and after the fight, he's like, I bet you could have measured the testosterone levels of the winner, and they would have been way higher than the loser.
Those are studies that have been done,
right?
And yes, the testosterone goes down in the losing team, so you get this interesting and goes up in the winning team,
right?
Which does relate to that other topic. the topic I mentioned at the beginning, psycho-proctology. That is my interest in what makes someone a butthead, which is a whole other area of my research.
Oh, come on.
But
I like when you said asshole better.
Oh no, I'm happy to do it. Call it whatever. So there is this advantage, the butthead, which is that I have to start. So you'll see the book. Neither goes to a machine. In the title, I corner myself. That is, I'm saying, I cannot explain selves as just machines, and I cannot explain them by saying that some phantom supernatural force got pumped into matter to make it come alive. Neither ghost nor machine. Okay. So with buttheads, my core question has been, what is a butthead, since it can't just be whomever you happen to butt heads with?
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
That's why that one comes up. But asshole's just as good. But anyway, whether you're male or some other gender, whether you're playing sports or not, there is a need for what we informally call mojo, a sense of self-efficacy, of self-esteem, all of that sort of stuff, that we're all hungering for that. And I would say we're really hungering for it because we got the shitstorm that language exposes us to, all of those anxieties. So there's all this stuff that's eroding our mojo through the course of the day. Yeah. And so we need to find a way to basically pit stops where we refuel our mojo. Yeah. And some of that would be through sports. That is, one can get addicted to trying to win. And I don't think of addiction as necessarily a bad thing. I happen to have addictions that I really love. I feel lucky to have the addictions I have. Addictions to study. I play music. But one thing we would definitely find in people is a need for to get these little ego boosts. Right. To sustain our sense of well-being. That is, I mean, I don't know if you've dealt with it. I know I did. I spent a lot of my first 40 years pretty anxious and pretty down on myself. That is, quick to berate myself. So that appetite is one that I consider fundamental. That is, we don't think of that ego. We think of that ego boost sort of stuff, the pursuit of status, as an affliction of deficient souls. Right. Like the weak people would do that. No, I think it's absolutely fundamental appetite in us, and I think that a lot of the way we get we work it out is through entertainment. I think of entertainment as a necessity, because from my perspective, with language, we became a really anxious species that could easily escape the anxiety through bullshit by basically becoming legends in our own mind through escapism. So for me, notice the bind I put myself in here. I'm saying, I put it in the first person just to illustrate it. I'm anxious. I need the world is too much. I'm simply exposed to too many possibilities because I have language. I need to boost my ego, and I can because I have language. I can make up stuff about what a cool guy I am. Right. Okay, so I can pump myself up. So I've got to figure out how to manage that, and for that I think of a fundamental question that I deal with in this new book on psycho-proctology, on assholes, is what's optimal illusion? How do I fake myself out in ways that help more than harm? Mm-hmm. I've got to be kidding myself about who I am. It's, if I were to look straight at me, it would make me very anxious. There are parts of me I don't want to see. It would reduce my confidence, would reduce my productivity in the world. So I do need some illusion. I cannot, the idea that someone could be totally realistic, I don't think that's possible. I don't think it's a desirable goal for humans anyway. If we were totally realistic, it would be a harder ride. So safe escapism is kind of fundamental in my research too. How do we bullshit ourselves in ways that help more than harm? Optimal illusion.
See, and that's so funny because it kind of makes me go, oh gosh, I'm just finally getting into this whole meditation thing. You know, this is like a new. I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid of like Sam Harris and then I see Jordan Peterson out there, and you know they sat for like 3 or 4 long 2-hour sessions. They didn't solve anything, right? There was like nothing at the end of it. So I was like, great, you know. Jordan Peterson talks so articulate that you just think he's intelligent just by the way that he's, you know, stroking his own ego with his own language. It's just like, you know, but it honestly, it sounds nice to listen to for a moment. But then you have someone like Sam Harris, who's just, there's so many good parts of it. And then all of a sudden, like I was listening to a conversation he had with talking to someone about artificial intelligence. And this guy was just on point about how this new research on this neocortex is coming out. And he's explaining it like you have nothing to worry about. Like we could just figure out the neocortex. We haven't even figured that out. And then we're good. We don't need to do all this other crap that we're doing with that the humans need to do. We can just just create a neocortex, and you can still always pull the plug because the neocortex only does like basic things. And it actually, I was like, I get that, you know? And the whole time he's sitting there like fighting him, like, no, that's no way. The switch is going to go on and the AI is going to take over the world. And it kind of, you know, I instantly like lose credibility. Like he loses credibility in my mind, you know? Because like I think because his, like you said, like he has to have, even as meditative and as enlightened as he comes across, and he might be enlightened in his own respect, you know, good for him. Even he has a blind spot, right? And that's okay to have a blind spot, and it's not bad. And maybe he has to have his own. He can't just be this Buddha who's this self, this person that's doesn't have self, right? That's only just
to me that part of Sam Harris is horseshit, and self-contradictory horseshit at that. Convince yourself you're not a self, or the other paradox, choose determinism. It's nonsense, and so I want to. That is obviously we are selves. We can pretend that we're not. I think of that as a kind of escapism, and there's advantage to visiting that escapism. Like I said a minute ago, I believe in optimal illusion. That is, that's fine with me if we self-aggrandize and all of that. We just got to do it safely. There are a number of so Sam Harris is in the camp that says we are machines. And it's understandable why people would come to that conclusion. That is, nothing our bodies do defy the laws of physics and chemistry. In that respect, we are still nothing but physics and chemistry. And yet there's something different in us, trying or effort, means to ends behavior, that isn't explained by chemistry. So even if you did have a full map of the neurons and the chemicals aren't trying to do anything. So a guy like Sam Harris or one of his interviewees, Robert Sapolsky, who I've admired and learned from over the years, they still talk as though a chemical causes a motivation.
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. Chemicals don't have motivations. It might trigger a motivation, but what is motivation? It's funny because motivation is the core concept in all of the social sciences, and you could say the life sciences too, biology too. But if you ask a scientist what a motivation is, they can't tell you. They can tell you that they know it by its consequences. That if I see you reaching for a burger, I might decide that you have a motivation to eat burgers. Okay, but and they know it happens in your body, and they know it involves chemistry. Your motivation involves your physiochemistry of your body. I mean your biochemistry,
right? And
yet it's not the chemistry itself. It's something else. So that's that core question I've been working on for 25 years. And if you don't, so check out the free will versus determinism debate.
God, that's
just
a good
couch
one.
it in this context, because a lot of what Sam Harris seems to be saying is that free will is an illusion. Right. Okay, you got this debate between people who assume that you have will, and are arguing that it is free, that it can do anything or something like that, or can do things untriggered. It's not responsive. That you could will just in this moment to jump up on your table and dance around naked. You have that kind of freedom.
Well, now that you said that and I do it, then obviously it's determinism because I only got the idea because you said it, right? So then if I did it, then I couldn't.
But check this out. The determinists are saying, look, you're nothing but a physical chemical device.
Right.
So no one in that debate is trying to understand what will is.
Okay.
And they're starting up at the level of humans, whereas there's will in the simplest organism. It's the will to live.
Yeah.
It's manifest in their trying to stay alive. Unlike that piece of steel I was talking about earlier, which is just sticking around because it's durable, organisms, these fragile little bubbles of things, like bacteria or the like, they have to hustle to regenerate themselves all day. And Sam Harris doesn't seem to want to go that way. He's fallen for what in our research we call the perfect storm. You get computation, you get research into DNA, and a number of other factors went into the way in which we have concluded that we are just computers.
Yeah.
Well, we're not computers. Computers don't have to hustle to keep themselves going. They don't have to hustle to find energy. The energy is supplied to them and is basically assumed away. We've made so that's a problem for me, which is that this assumption that we are just machines. And in general, what you'll get from a guy like Sam Harris, in my opinion, is equivocation. That is, to even say that a self is determined. Well, what's a self? If I'm just physical chemistry, why do you have to distinguish me as a self? And also, just I double dare those guys to talk for even a minute, as if there's no, as if organisms aren't making effort. I mean, put your words where your assumptions are. Try talking without any words that imply trying, without any words that imply effort, without any words that imply good versus bad, better versus worse. That is, we're trying to do things. Because we're trying to do things, some possibilities are better for us than others with respect to our trying.
Yeah.
If you got a goal, then there's good news and bad news. If you got no goals, if you're not trying to achieve anything like staying alive, then it's all good. And so anyway, there's
great.
A lot there, and we're jumping from topic to topic. I hope that's okay.
I like the fact that this whole free will thing is coming up. I guess what it's interesting to go back to what you're saying about trying, though, again, to just really because it still is not. I still haven't it's not finished yet for you either, right?
No.
So you can't just say, well, this is trying, but when I think about it, I'm just taking this stupid beginner course here at Harvard right now, online, because I wanted to kind of get into neurology a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the first thing that you learn is resting potential, like this bioelectricity thing, the way that you just have a picture of a positive and negative charge, and one pushes it away, or and then it becomes into the cell membrane. Then you have the charge outside of the membrane is our base charge, and inside the membrane, and so then you have this pushing and pulling, and it kind of makes me think of what you're saying. This is like a physical law, right? There's
energetic potential everywhere. I mean, in all sorts of manifestations. One of them would be electrical, another one would be chemical potential. So there's that, and it is kind of push and pull. But I'm also saying, even if you analyze all the pushes and pulls, you still haven't explained effort.
Yeah,
that is, magnets push and pull towards each other, but they're not trying to. They have no goals.
Their properties.
And I should make this clear. I'm not just raising these questions. For 25 years, in our 25 years working on this, I worked with a Harvard neuroscientist who then moved to Berkeley, which is convenient for me. He was on my PhD committee. I wasn't at Harvard, but he seconded. He joined my PhD committee, and then he moved out here, and we've been working on this theory for 25 years. It's a theory that explains, with no smoke and mirrors, how the first chemical system that was trying to keep itself going could have emerged from simple chemistry, not quantum chemistry, nothing fancy like this. We're operating at the scale, time and space scale, where it's simple chemistry. So no, we're not going on to quantum mechanics, and we're just trying to explain it with no smoke and mirrors. And we have a theory. It's actually pretty straightforward. It's pretty intuitive for how you'd ever get the first trying system, the first self that is engaged in self-directed work, that is work by itself for its own benefit,
Okay.
within its circumstances, that is adapted or fitted to its circumstances. If we don't have an explanation for that, we're basically hand waving. And a whole lot of the research, a lot of the people who would go on Sam Harris's show, for example, would be people who are starting up at the level of humans. Well, we're a very complicated thing to start with. And, they're trying to understand it in terms of feelings and cognition, self-awareness and all of that. No, explain trying from the start. My assumption is that if you know how something emerged from what preceded it, you'll have a better understanding of what it is.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, I get that.
And it's kind of fundamental in the sciences too. I mean, it's an unwritten law, and it's one that's kind of ignored in the cognitive sciences. But it's the lower level sciences must explain what the higher level sciences assume. And if they don't, you're just describing things. It's a kind of poetic engineering that you're doing if you don't have an explanation for how the thing came about in the first place. So that's what we do with trying, and we have an explanation. Whether it's right or not, time and science will tell. But in the meantime, we find very few other even attempts to explain what trying is from the very start.
Yeah.
Most origins of life research is about replicating chemicals, about RNA copying itself.
Okay.
Well, RNA is a chemical. It's not. It only means something to an organism that is trying. So you get a chemical copying, big deal. It's not really. That's not the origins of life. The origins of life is the origins of trying.
And how do you go about because this 25 years of research? Do you guys publish something, or how does that work? I only hear that. I always hear researchers publishing, and it goes into a paper, and that's like I don't have any other ideas of how else you because it's kind of a peer checked system in some sense, right? Like there's.
Oh yeah. So this is again my advantage as being a gentleman scholar. I don't. So my research colleague, he was my mentor. Like I say, he was on my PhD committee, but he went the full route. He went to Harvard, got his PhD there, taught at Harvard for many years, then moved to UC Berkeley. He's squarely in that game. And he writes academic papers, and they are peer reviewed and all of that. And I've written some, but early on, so this is my second career. I had started out in environmental activism, public policy, all of that. I had a midlife crisis around 38 years old, and ended up turning my attention here, which meant that it was going to be hard for me to get a tenured professor position. Yeah. I didn't even go that route, and part of that is because I was such a generalist. In academics discourages the breadth that I've been describing in this thing, everything from cradle to grave, everything from origins of life to psycho-proctology, the study of assholes. I mean, I have taught in colleges, but it's hard getting jobs when you're this broad.
They want you to stay in the lane. They want you to be you're a research scientist in this one area. That's your doctor.
That's right. Yeah. So it's very siloed. Okay. But in the meantime, my prior career had me doing a lot of work in social marketing. I mean, I lived in Europe for 2.5 years. I was the head of public affairs for the Body Shop International, the cosmetics shop because I was an environmental activist. I was invited in to help radicalize the company, the president said. So I had done all this work in marketing, and I got really interested in how to make these ideas accessible. And at first, this made my mentor and colleague a little uncomfortable because he wanted to make sure that we applied the rigor and went through the protocol. He didn't want my work to taint the scientific work he was doing. But over time, we both relaxed into, by now I have written academic things. That book that Neither Ghost Nor Machine, The Emergence and Nature of Selves, that's a Columbia University Press book. So that's academic writing. It was peer reviewed and all of that. Yeah. So I do that. But in the meantime, Terry, my research colleague, Terry Deacon, has come to recognize that there are real advantages to saying things as simply as possible. And it is not his writing style. He has a tendency to write rather densely. So he really did need a kind of a translator, and I ended up being that.
That's cool.
And how do we do our research? Mostly these days on dog walks. So he's doing his research. He's teaching at University of California, Berkeley. Yeah. And he'll call me up. He's probably going to call me this morning. He's got a Bernese mountain dog. Nice. We go out to a local park and we have very serious, productive conversations. And then we go home and do our respective writing.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, fresh air, right? I mean, it's the best way to be outside and just have this open dialogue with a colleague. You guys are both so deep in it, and then new ideas probably are just flying around.
It's like what you were describing earlier about podcasts. That is, I mean, I read a lot, not by hand anymore. I get through a book a week, but by speed listening to them. That is, I listen to books. Yeah. I haven't actually sat down to read a book or article in a long time, but I get through a lot of it. But back when I was in school, learning from books was hard. Learning from conversations was easy. It's the easiest way to learn because you can follow up on whatever's come up for you. You can clarify things. So what you get out of podcasts, I've had the good fortune to get from 25 years jamming with these guys who are steeped in it. And that includes conferences. We have a whole posse in effect out here. There's about 25 or 30 of us who are in one way or another following out this research that with Terry. And it's some of the effect that people get when they listen to a Jordan Peterson or a Sam Harris, though I would also say it's different because I actually think there's back to this thing about needing Mojo pit stops.
Yeah.
These days, I'm thinking like at least half of what motivates people to fall in love with a Jordan Peterson is this sense. It's the dream of enlightenment, the dream that someone has got to figure it out. Here we are all hornswoggled with doubt. We've got doubts and anxieties. And so naturally, we would come up with this idea. We would have this. There would be appeal to someone who looks like they're finessing life, like they're surfing it perfectly. And at this point in my life, I do not trust the concept of enlightenment in any of its manifestations. I think it's next door neighbors to asshole. Anybody who acts, the charisma you get from someone who thinks that who appears to be just straight up got it all figured out. No, that's demagoguery. I'm much more interested in we're all fallible humans trying to figure it out. Trying in that sense is not just about effort. It's about the fact that life is iffy. Yeah. This is, I think, the most disappointing news from Darwin. Not that there's a diminished role for God, not that we came from chimps, but that there's no formula. That there's no one true formula. You got this clusterfuck of formulas to pick from, and you're trying to figure it out. And no matter what you do, you can bet really well and have it come out terrible. That's a fundamental problem that's not easy for people to deal with. So no, it's totally fine with me. I watch a fair amount of TV at night. I practice bass while I'm doing it. But I love to watch the people who finesse the everything in the fantasy world. That's my escapism. I'll identify with a James Bond who doesn't even seem upset about anything. No, but that's fiction, and I'm happy to do it in fictional form. I'm just not going to buy it in real life. We're all guessing, and these guys who come across with that swagger. I don't trust it anymore in anyone, not even in the Buddha. No way. No, we're just we're these monkeys trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good that he's the neighbor to the that's the enlightened guy
Yeah.
is, and it's so true too when you listen to some of these. I mean, there's so obviously some really good people out there that they have. Oh, usually what it is though, to bring back to it's their style of talking, and
It is no, it's a rhetorical style.
yeah, it's a and it's also like this magic of language coming back again. Like I've kind of been getting back into the Four Agreements. Do you know this book from what's his name?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I don't personally buy it, but
this whole dream thing, and I'm just kind of just letting it go in.
No, I mean the agreements themselves, I think, are flawed.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. Fair enough. But
does he have? There's one in there. Don't lie. Is that right?
I think the four. I had it just pulled up in a second ago.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I never read it. I scanned it and said not for me.
Yeah.
No, I did that stuff in my 20s.
Well, see,
their answers were the springboards to my questions.
Yeah. Well, I'm hitting that 38. You know, I'm getting there. You were there. I'm feeling that midlife crisis coming on. So I'm trying to prepare for.
I managed to get 2 midlife crises in before I turned 65 a couple of months ago. Now I can no longer have midlife crises. Yeah, I'm officially old.
Yeah.
I was trying to squeeze in a third one. I couldn't.
I think you're right. The first one is be impeccable with your word. So don't lie. But I think what he meant with be impeccable with your word was kind of what you were saying. They were saying something about the magic of language and how the words that come out of your mouth are actually magic. And it's pretty similar to what you were saying in the sense that that we humans, we got this thing language, and now we're just it's kind of slapstick almost that these monkeys have this amazing ability to project the future, and obviously anxiety comes along with that, and so Sam Harris tells you to delete yourself so that you don't have the anxiety and equanimity and don't whatever or don't I mean, equanimity is attractive to me in a sense too, because it gives you this tool to somehow I care about it, but I also don't let it trigger me. So I'm not gonna. I have 3 kids, so they trigger me pretty easily. They kind of know where.
I have 3 kids, and they triggered me plenty too.
Yeah, and so it is nice sometimes to be it's easier for me to love them if I don't let them constantly emotionally bombard me with their shit, because they're just kids. They're just 3 years old or whatever. They're just doing what 3-year-olds do. I don't need to take it personal, but I do sometimes. I'm why am I getting in a fight with a 3-year-old right now? But
yeah. So, I think enlightenment is a fine goal as long as you recognize that no one achieves it. It's fine to have these idealizations. I think of them as fruitful exercises in futility. I mean that paradoxically.
But fruitful.
No, you're never going to achieve enlightenment. Humans couldn't, and it's more fundamental than that. Humans can't because organisms can't. We're guessing at what to do in a world that is inherently uncertain for a number of reasons. That is, I don't operate on the assumption that the game board is stable. The game board keeps on changing. So what would solve problems in one situation can cause problems in another situation. We're guessing which situation we're dealing with. We will do that. That's inescapable for us. Still, the idea, what I'll call figments of ultimate satisfaction.
Figments, yeah.
Are easy to come up with. They will come to mind, and they make for fine goals, but you just have to recognize that they're not achievable. And you'll find it often in the manifestation of things like the 4 Agreements or the 10 Commandments. That is, here's the formula for living, always, everywhere. And I just don't buy it. Yeah. If you want to talk about being impeccable with your language, fine goal. I work on it a lot. I'm very fussy about language, but I do recognize what's going on with language. Words do not code to things. It's way more squirrely than that. It's more promiscuous than that. Semioticians, people who work in the area of trying to understand how words work, recognize that, or it's kind of obvious. If I say that words are promiscuous, I mean they sleep around with lots of meanings.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that words have sex.
Yeah.
I'm saying that they are slippery stuff.
Yeah.
And as a result, and we can try to get some precision, in law, in medicine, in the hard sciences, we gain some precision, but we have to recognize that words, at least in everyday use, are really slippery. So yes, the goal of being impeccable with your words. What does he mean by impeccable? He kind of means hella good. What does that mean?
Hella good. Yeah.
That's open to debate. What's good in one situation, it may not be in another. Yeah. Anybody who claims that they always tell the truth, no matter what, is lying. It's just not possible. It wouldn't even be a good idea.
Why is it that all people why is it that the person that's always telling you to trust them is never you can never trust them, right? Yeah.
I love this. I've unpacked the saying "trust me" into or "believe me." Take the term "believe me." It means, I know you don't believe me, but believe me, you should believe me. That's what it means. So language is complicated stuff. To be impeccable is a nice goal, but it's unachievable. And not only that, it's a goal that's also counterposed with another goal, which is to be tactful, be kind. So finding words that are true, finding words that are kind, they will often conflict. Whenever you have two rules, there's the potential for conflict between them. And if you just lay them out as 4 rules and you laud them as you generate, you pump each rule up independently.
Yeah.
You're never going to see that actually, no, these rules conflict with each other in places. As soon as you got 2 rules, you need another rule to decide when to apply which. It's complicated. Life is complicated. I do think there's some compassion to be had for us. It's hard to figure out what to try to do.
I love talking with you, man. I'm enjoying. I know I'm having a good conversation when the hour is almost gone by, and it feels like we've been talking for 10 minutes. This is great. I appreciate it. I love just letting you go too. Like what you mentioned, I have scribbled out here on my piece of paper, ego death, because I've also had like this thought in my mind. Well, the ego is getting in the way.
I don't.
Yeah, and I know you don't agree with that, and these people that have experimented with like psilocybin and psychedelics in order.
Yeah, I've done that stuff too.
Yeah, from Berkeley, I assumed you'd have some.
Yeah, Michael Pollan, the big name in it these days, and I liked his book. I like his writing a lot. Yeah. He's the guy who wrote How to Change Your Mind. That might be one of the books you're referring to.
Yeah.
No, I thought that book made a silly move. To claim that the drug teaches you the one true way is to make it like a god.
Yeah.
And the idea that there's no self, he's even backed away from it since he wrote that book. It's just jive. If you look at life, every living being is selfish. That is, it's got to do work to maintain itself. That's going to be its priority.
Yeah.
With humans, it gets a little more complicated. That is, you can have people who will sacrifice their lives. But the idea of ego death is akin to the idea of revelation. That is, what would be a nice thing for an anxious being like us? It would be to be permanently, eternally ensured safety and freedom. That is, unconstrained by anything, but at no risk of losing what matters to us. That would be the ideal. So the idea of being a disembodied soul at the right hand of God, which is what you'll get from Christianity or something like that, or the idea of going through an ego death and being in that sense invulnerable from then on. Sure, no, that would be humanity's wet dream. No, it's not reality at all. No, reality is you are a self. You are going to continue to try. Yeah. You're going to hope that the trying ends up good, and it might not. That's the reality.
I remember listening to him. Also, I'm obviously a Joe Rogan podcast guy who isn't. Sometimes I don't know. It's weird. I don't want to talk about it too much. But Michael Pollan's reaction to the drug DMT was absolutely so honest. I appreciated it because he's like, never again. It's not for me. I don't need to go there. I don't need, like, because they talk.
Yeah.
I've never done DMT before, and this is
I think I have. I can't remember. I think someone gave me some once.
but this is the psychedelic experiment to me, where I feel like, well, that's kind of the promise of this. Exactly what you meant, right? What you said is that he straps you onto a rocket. The rocket shoots you to the center of the universe. You have no up, down, left, right. You feel like you're gonna die. Oh my God, I made a huge mistake. And then 10 minutes later, you come back, and you feel your ego kind of coming back down and saying, okay, I'm gonna take care of you. I'm here again. And so you kind of feel like this reconstructive process happening. Whatever the reason. This is what everyone talks about. And he said it was horrible. It was the most horrible. He thought, like, because he literally felt like for 10 minutes he was on this rocket, and he was, the lights, it was white, and it was loud. And he's like, I don't ever need to do it again. I'm done. And so I thought that was so nice, so honest that he at least said that. But still, the promise of at least once a year having this ego death in order to keep you, down. It's like, I don't know. I hear that, and I hear that promise of God, or this promise of what you mentioned, that you have, in that sense, a get out of jail free card from all of humans' problems, and now everything's connected, and so you're just a better person, right? It's almost like
you're insured. You're insured that you are a good person.
Yeah,
I think is what they're after.
Yeah.
Is what would be the appetite in all of us. I certainly know it myself. Look, I've been an atheist for since my childhood, and yet there was still in me this sense that in the end my life would be judged to be either well spent or poorly spent, and that was motivating in its way, but it's also kind of an illusion. That's not how lives end. Lives don't end in glory. They don't usually end very well. If you look at how lives go, some can end beautifully, but there's no guarantee of that. They can be very messy ends. I'm not living for that anymore. I'm living to make good use of my time here, and yes, I'll enjoy the fantasy of absolute freedom and absolute safety, which is exactly what an organism would want. That they could do anything. They've got a wild card. They can do whatever they want, and they've got a trump card. Whatever they do is best. That would be the dream.
Yeah.
But it's an illusion. It's a figment of ultimate satisfaction. And so when I hear people who are basically touting another variation on how to get there, I'm just no longer interested.
Yeah,
it's not interesting to me. Whether they're Jordan Peterson doing it as if they're the intellectually brilliant guy who's got it all figured out, or whether they say you can do it through drugs, or whether they're saying that if you take this meditation practice or you join this philosophy or theology or spiritual path, none of that interests me anymore. I'm trying to figure out what this mid-sized monkey with language does. That's my game. I find it much more interesting.
Yeah, it's something that you don't hear. It's true, to go all the way, just go bring it all the way back down. We don't need to. We're too complicated to figure out right now. Just explain to me the trying from the first organisms that where we can actually prove that there's trying happening, right? Like down to
and we can see what it is in its most simple form. And here we've only talked about the question. I haven't given you the explanation, but it's actually not that complicated, though it might take more than a few minutes. So if we're ending soon, but I can tell you this. Let me just say this much about it.
Okay.
And bring it to the street level. You engage to get to what you want to get done in the day. You engage in a lot of self-discipline and self-control. You limit what you do. You don't just fritter away your time. You don't just dither. Of all the things you could do, you do some things and not other things. So what is that? You're preventing yourself from doing the other things.
Correct.
When you prevent yourself from doing your other things by a process of elimination, you're doing some things instead of just anything, right? I mean, that's basic. And you do that in your daily life. You do this with your 3 kids. You do this so that tomorrow you'll be alive again to do it some more. So what I come to from our chemical origins of life is that life is not something added to chemistry like a ghost, nor is it just the chemistry. What is it? It's the ways that the chemistry constrains what happens.
Okay.
The natural tendency is for things to fall apart. We were talking about that earlier. But you can get a chemical system where it prevents falling apart. So to me, living is the prevention of dying. And as a result, this is how I would describe myself. And that includes, you could say, the 3 levels of self I am. I've got that self that's regenerating, the silent self that's regenerating 240 billion cells a day and doing all sorts of other business I don't know about. I got my emotional self. I've got my language-fueled cognitive self. But I would say all of that stuff is what I am is a constraint that channels energy into work to regenerate constraint. I am my self-discipline at the most fundamental unconscious level. That is, I am preventing myself from doing the shit that would make me fall apart. And I do that until I fall apart, at which point I'm no longer there and the molecules are free to do whatever. The molecules that were in me on the last day of my life, they go off and dither doing whatever, no longer trying to do anything.
That works for me, man.
My trying is not something added. It's not something added to physics and chemistry. It's a way that physics and chemistry can self-limit themselves.
Yeah.
And there's nothing very cosmic about it. To give you a sense of how limits like that happen, think of traffic congestion. When there's no traffic congestion, the path of least resistance is straight down the road. If there's traffic congestion, that reduces it makes another path the path of least resistance. So there are changes of likeliness that simply come about through what we call emergent constraints. So traffic congestion would be an emergent constraint. It's not a physical imposed constraint like a wall. It's made of matter, the cars that are stuck in it, but they're passing through, and yet it changes what happens. So I actually think that I am a constraint that channels energy into work to regenerate the constraint. And I'm going to do that until I die. That's my plan.
That's a very nice explanation. I get that. I love that it's discipline that keeps us alive. So discipline is something that when you hear that word growing up or in high school or from your, you know that's what you're supposed to do. And it's not instantly rewarding. It's hard to do. So it must be good. I mean, it's just
right. No, they say no pain, no gain, but that doesn't mean that all pain yields gain. So that one's a little more complicated, and I don't mean that part of the self-discipline. That is, I'm saying something in a way more basic than that.
Okay.
Discipline is, you could say, it's a deliberation. It's when you do something deliberately, you are unfreeing yourself. So rather than just dithering, which is fine to do on a Sunday or whenever you're off. But whenever you're trying to do something, you're preventing yourself from doing other things.
Yeah.
That's what's overlooked. That's why neither ghost nor machine, there is an alternative to that. So we're simply looking at how chemical systems could end up in this place where they reduce the likelihood of falling apart and dithering.
Yeah, so if that's the true nature of life, let's say.
Yes. Yeah.
Then
that's what we're saying.
If I can replicate that with my consciousness, with my actual, if I know that this is the true nature of life, then the closer that I mask that consciously, the better off I am. So the less that I Netflix and chill and go to McDonald's and just shit brain myself, the longer I'm gonna live. Because that's like the way that I see it, just in my little monkey brain right now.
That's good, but
it's not enough.
So again, I will not jump to a formula from this, But in a way, I want to relate it to something. If
we have time.
I said earlier that I love my addictions.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of discipline things that don't take discipline from me anymore. Not like the high school discipline you were talking about before. I don't. When I just my happiness comes from having projects for which I have infinite patience and I want to do them. Mind you, when I was raising 3 young kids like you, it didn't always feel like that. And most lives, you don't get to do what you're more strapped into obligations than I am. But what I'm saying is, I have a bunch of free time. I lucked into a bunch of free time, and I like how I spend it to where it doesn't feel like work. It feels like it's indistinguishable. Work and play for me are indistinguishable. I happen to be doing. It's a really fortunate situation, but and I also said earlier we need the escapism. So getting to McDonald's, I haven't been there in a while, though I did go to Taco Bell the other morning. I had extra 45 minutes and I decided to go get a Crunch Wrap. I like those. No, so figuring out where to indulge, how to indulge right, and not beating yourself up with the self-discipline formulas. You know, there are as many school marms in the new age hippie counterculture enlightenment world as there were in the Catholic nunneries. I mean, it's nice to get it's nice to have someone out there discouraging you from doing what you think you shouldn't do, but I don't buy the formula that if you eat purely and if you live your life every day purely, you'll live better and happier and longer. It's messier than that for me.
For sure.
I indulge I indulge like the next guy.
Yeah,
basically.
And you know, that's cool too. I think that if you don't do that, it's almost like you're repressing this natural thing that you should be doing, and it comes out in another way, some other way. It's like the Catholic Church. I don't need to go theological on that one.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely.
You know, but it's also like I like this the way that it constrains you, because if I'm going, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. Like I love going to, so if I go to jiu-jitsu practice, I'm not doing anything what I'm not doing at that moment is what you're talking about. Right. So
that's right. To get to your to-do list, you're basically working to prevent your to-don't list.
Yeah.
And often we do that by tethering ourselves to something motivating outside us, a personal coach, a course, a spouse. All of that can be a way to get external assist for your own projects. So you know, I've long operated on the assumption that I can't always change myself, but I can usually change my environment so it changes me.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So if I want to if I want to keep from doing something, there are a bunch of external assists that will help me keep myself from doing them. And I only need enough willpower to engage with those external sources. Of course, the other problem is that you can have external sources that keep you from doing what you think you should be doing.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous thing in a partnership. I've only been married once, but been in various courtships and engagements, etc. But for me, what it turned out to be, I wanted a partner who was delighted when I got around to what I wanted to be doing, what I thought was a priority, and disappointed when I didn't. But you can also end up with a partner who's the reverse of that, who's disappointed in you when you are doing what is your priority, and delighted in you when you are doing what you don't want to be doing anymore. So if you have chosen for yourself not to be eating at McDonald's, and your spouse is someone who's always disappointed when you don't go to McDonald's with them, that can be a problem. You want a partner who rubs you right and wrong the right ways, not the wrong ways.
Can we, I don't know how much time you have. I'm good to go. I'm enjoying this conversation, but I have a feeling like you kind of do have to eventually move on with your day.
No, let me make sure of one thing here quickly.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Okay. Because before we kind of touched on it, but I'd like to dive into this psycho-proctology. So this is the the new book that you're working on, and you're releasing it as a pod class, which I like to play on words. So that's cool. So you're actually going to be reading the book.
It's already out. It's already available as a podcast or pod class.
Okay.
So
what's it called?
No, this is a book that the hard copy is not available yet. I can send a PDF to anyone who wants it. I'm not. I don't need to make money off of it. So I just put it out for free.
Cool.
Which is a dangerous thing because it can reduce the status of it. You get what you pay for, kind of an assumption.
I think that's cool.
But no, I put a lot of work into this book, and it's rumor has it that as strangers have told me how much they've gotten out of it, especially strangers who are dealing with someone who they consider to be an asshole. So it's called "What's Up with Assholes: Advanced Psycho-proctology for Beginners," and it's dealing with, you could say, it's dealing almost in a clinical way with a category that doesn't get much clinical attention. We talk about narcissists, we talk about psychopaths, we talk these days about the dark triad personality, which is narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. But we don't talk about assholes. And yet everybody else outside of the psychological research community talks about assholes a lot. It's a big term in folk psychology. So I'm dealing with asshole diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. That's what this book is about. And the core question that got me going on in the first place is, what is a butthead, since it can't just be whomever you happen to butt heads with? That is, you can't, in general these days, people define asshole as someone they find uncommonly stubborn or resistant or a pain in the ass. So I'm saying if we go around defining them subjectively like that, what do we get? We get a world of butthead on butthead battles. Just people just opposing teams declaring that the other one is the asshole. So I actually spend about you could say 200 pages or 10 short podcast episodes, because podcasts are a really great way to get through a lot of words. Just on the question of how you would define an asshole. And it does relate to the stuff that we were talking about earlier, about how anxious how all organisms are struggling for their own existence, how humans are doing that under the influence, you could say, the drunken influence of language, since language is such there's nothing you can't imagine with language. And how language makes us an unusually anxious species. That's stuff I was talking about earlier, about how we have way more to worry about than a dog does. And how language also frees us to imagine any way to escape the anxiety, including the 4 agreements or the assumption that you're not a self, or you're going to come up with all sorts of ways of pretending away the anxiety. And we all do that. Like I said also earlier, I believe in optimal illusion. I believe in kidding myself. I'm an atheist, but don't get me wrong, I'm as delusional as the next guy. I have my fantasies. I couldn't possibly live this life without thinking, to give you an example, I think of myself as having qualities I don't have. Good qualities I don't have. I think more highly of myself than I probably should or would if I saw myself from the outside. In that, I'm like a human being, right? Okay. Yeah. So we all have that tendency. There's a fundamental thing in the origins of life research that relates here. So I just want to connect it up here. Yeah. All organisms have to be selectively interactive with their environment. They have to take in water, but not poison, for example. In humans with language, that manifests as confirmation bias. That is, we'll have a strong tendency to take in what regenerates our mojo and keep out whatever degenerates our mojo. As we don't like to be disappointed, okay? So for normal humans, that's a problem that has to be managed. So if someone disappoints you, you might bark at them for 5 minutes, even if it's a 3-year-old. But sooner or later, you recognize that maybe you're reading it wrong. Maybe they're right maybe it's some feedback you got to take in, that sort of thing. That's what normal people do. For assholes, confirmation bias is the solution to all of their problems. That is, no matter what, they have found a way to deflect anything that could possibly discourage them and embrace anything that could possibly encourage them. And they can give themselves a false impression of a eternal winning streak. And so that's kind of where I end up in my definition of an asshole. I say from the beginning of the book, I don't use the word asshole more than once in the book. From then on, I call them a-holes, because I think it's kind of terrible to have the word for this horrible behavior we have to stop in all humans, in all its manifestations, no matter what they claim their cause is. I think we have to stop assholes. But to have a word for it that you can't use with kids, that's pretty terrible. It's like trying to teach your kid, trying to potty train your kid when you can't mention poop. So we talk about them as bullies, and there's something to that. But anyway, I end up calling them, by the end of the book, I'm calling them Trump bots. That is, they are robotically playing trumped up Trump cards. So this is not about Donald Trump.
Exactly.
He's a master Trump bot, but this is way more general. You can be a Buddhist Trump bot. You could be a Four Agreements Trump bot. You could be a Sam Harris Trump bot. It's not a matter of what you claim to believe. It's how you strut it. You strut it as if you are a permanent winner. You've got the formula. So Trump is a fabulous word because it's, remember talking about how words are promiscuous? Trump means two things. It means beats all rivals, like a trump card. But it also means fake, as in trumped up. So a Trump bot is someone who robotically plays trumped up or fake trump cards. And that gives them total freedom. It is because they can fake it, they can always claim that whatever they do, they can justify it. And whatever so this is back to that thing about what all organisms would want. They want total freedom and total safety. This is what your 3-year-old wants.
I mean, it's pretty obvious sometimes. Like sometimes I sit there with my wife and I'm like, I don't want to say it, but she's kind of being a bitch right now, It's like a 3-year-old little girl.
Of course they are. And so I take that to be our ground state. I don't think of humans as having fallen from grace.
She just doesn't have the filter,
We rose from slime. And when we're kids, we're going to want to follow out all our impulses. That's the exercising of our selfhood. And it takes a while to learn it, and some people never do, and some people learn to discipline themselves, and then some people fall back into non-discipline, or they, there's all sorts of variations. How you become an asshole is I think there's a million
ways.
Paths,
There's probably more ways to become one than to not, right?
That's right. No, that's a beautiful point. No, that no matter what path you take, there is a tempting detour down into assholia right there. No matter what path you take. That's why those formula things that say, here's a clear path, get on this train. You can't fall off of it. As long as you stay with this train, you won't end up an asshole. Those things sound to me like detours to assholia.
Because you're denying this basically, you're denying this thing that's always there, right? And the more that you deny it, the more that it can sneak up on you, right? If you're not aware of it somehow.
That's right. No, the formulas for assholery tend to be
sneaky
formulas that promise to guarantee you that you won't be an asshole. Like the Four Agreements would be an example of that.
The other day I was I have a friend that's a very I don't even know. See, the thing is I don't know how to say it. It's this it's the big writing for the Dharma, right? For the original Indian. I think it's like
the Upanishads, baby.
No, I think it's the Bhagavad or something, but I don't know how it's called. It's like the 2,000-year-old,
most revered, the original most revered
writing for Buddhism, right? But I think it's actually for Hinduism. I think it's more like in the Indian tradition. And I was trying to I was like, tell me about it. And she's like, well, there's a story about the warrior and basically God, and they're on this chariot, and you have to.
You're talking about Bhagavad Gita, baby.
Thank you. Bhagavad Gita? That's how you say it.
Yeah.
Right? And so we kind of went through this whole thing.
Great story.
Yeah, and it really, I kind of got listening to the story. I'm not fully through it yet, and I was like, God, it's so
No, it's long.
it's a long one, right? And it's actually a guy reading it. It's not the actual book itself, because I heard that's really hard. That's a pretty tricky read. But either way, I just thought it was interesting because what's the flip side of that? And I had this conversation. So my buddy and his wife were over at dinner, and she was explaining to me, and my buddy, he's just like, yeah, and the caste system in India, dark side maybe. So
clearly, yes, that's right.
And that just surprised me, because I'm thinking of it so innocently, like, gosh, isn't it nice to always be in your place and know what your vocation is, and do all these things and stay. It was like this whole ego death thing. I'm like, cool, just work every day, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, now I get it. Like it's really good for the people running the system, right? Because you just have everyone stay in their cask, and they don't jump out of their area. They don't want to jump to the next level. They just want to stay humble in their in their little.
Yes, they're hoping for progress across lifetimes, that sort of thing. Yeah. But here's an interesting thing about all those sacred texts. They're often usually touted, as the formula for the right way to live. But if you read them and you look at their history, they're more like a catalog of rationalizations for whatever people end up doing. So think of the Bible, for example. Let's just take the Old Testament or the New Testament or both. They're treated as the formula for living right, but you could rationalize anything out of it. It's a catalog. It's a catalog of rationalizations.
Yeah. So
notice that if you have a catalog of rationalizations, you have total freedom. Yeah. And if it's touted as the sacred one true way, the guide to the one true way, you've got the trump card. So I know people who get a lot out of them, but then I get a lot out of Marvel comic movies. You can find wisdom in whatever.
Right.
There are plenty of people who read the Bible and get good wisdom out of it.
Sure.
Just like I do with a Marvel movie like Guardians of the Galaxy. I find wisdom in it. Or I just watched the series Big Mouth. I just loved it. I thought it was deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That cartoon series by Nick Kroll.
Yeah. Nick Kroll is amazing.
Yeah. But if you look at why these books would be so incredibly popular, I think it's the wild card, trump card formula. I think that's what really draws us to it. The sense that we can rationalize anything and claim that it trumps all other possibilities because it came from this sacred text.
Right.
And I don't. That's a controversial thing to say, but it's actually historically non-controversial. If you simply look at what has been justified, good and bad, with reference to this one guidebook, whichever sacred text you pick, it is clear that it is not pointing to the one true way. It is clear that very contradictory things have been justified in its name.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the history tells you this. It's there. It's
right there. I mean, it's obvious. No debate. And so when you get the 10 rules for living from Jordan Peterson,
and then 10 more or 12 more, I think he added another 12 in the second book or something.
That's right. And he did that after a rough patch, bless his heart.
Right.
Got addicted to some kind of psychopharmaceutical.
Yeah, benzopine.
But just to notice this appetite, to notice that here's a 38-year-old who's juggling a lot in his life and would have an appetite. Whether that be me at 38, which is, you're right on schedule by my standards. You're doing exactly what I was doing at 38.
Yeah.
But that to notice that appetite, why we would want a formula, and how many are on offer, and the appetite to be able to relax about ourselves, to get over anxiety. That would be a strong appetite in us.
Yeah.
And an unachievable one. You can't get over it. That is, I'm assuming that I'm dealing with the same dilemmas for the rest of my life. The same tough judgment calls will come up over and over. I deal with them in stereo. meaning that whenever I worry about being too much of something, I always worry about being too little of that same thing too. Am I too egotistical? Am I not egotistical enough? Am I standing up for myself appropriately or inappropriately in two directions? Not standing up for myself enough, standing up for myself too much. In fact, my idea of perfect peace is where I'm equally anxious about both possibilities. That's about as close as I'm going to get to peace.
No, that sounds good. It sounds like you find that, but I admit, I know I'm too soft here and I'm too hard on myself and I don't stand up for myself enough. I know that, but then when you swing it back to the other way, it sucks too, right? Because you get like, wait a minute, now I'm just being an ass. Now I'm just being an asshole. Like if I'm always just on my point, and it's like you got to find that middle spot somewhere.
Yeah. So this is true. I've been thinking a lot lately about what I'll call virtue maxing, which is this assumption that there are these moves that are virtue moves and these moves that are vice moves. And what you want to do is absolutely maximize the virtues and eliminate the vices. So an example would be love is the answer. You can never have too much love, and we should eliminate all hate. Well, that's just not how it works. The question is what to love in which context and what to hate. And I'll tell you why, because love is a preference, and preferences are always relative. If you prefer one thing, you prefer it over other things. So the more you love something, the more you will hate its opposite.
Right.
So the question really becomes where you're going to point that thing, where you're going to point that love, and where you're going to point that hate. If you love justice, you hate injustice, and you shouldn't mince words about it. You should admit that you hate injustice. And if you go around saying, well, no, I'm only interested in maximizing love, you're stunting your growth on the real question: is what to love. Love is the question for me. It's not the answer. It's the question. What should I love? What should I not? I can't love everything.
Right.
If love takes effort, I'm going to have to allocate that effort. I have limited effort. I only have 24 hours in a day and this short life, and I need to go to the bathroom, things like that. Things are going to take time. So where am I going to allocate my finite love is the question. And once again, you get these formulas where people say, well, I've embraced in principle the concept that love is the answer. And so you can count on me to be a loving person. And if you don't think I'm loving, well, you're a loser. And that one in particular has come up over and over. Every sacred text touts itself as selling universal love. They can't. No one could love everything. You can't love everything. So virtue maximizing is another variation on that temptation we have to find a formula. I'm trying to figure out where to be assertive. If people sometimes say to me, "Don't be a name caller." And I say, I don't want to just be a name caller. I want to be a name caller with surgical precision. Yeah. I want to name call in the ways that help more than harm.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's kind of like punching up in comedy.
Virtue names. Yeah. All the virtues end up being vices in some context, and all the vices end up being virtues in context. That's where you're stuck with these dilemmas. The dilemma overall about where are you too assertive? Are you not assertive enough? Yeah. And the answer to that depends on the situation, and we are just guessing. That is, I assume that throughout the rest of my life, there are going to be times when I will look back and say I wasn't assertive enough or I was too assertive. I can't get a perfect score. Yeah. I'm just trying to get better at it.
Just the actual, yeah, exactly. Like just the fact that you have that as a I only have the word in German, Ansatz in English. How do you say that? As a way of going about it. Like if you just have a way of going about it, if that's like part of your thought process is just knowing that you're not going to get it every time, but you're at least having a little bit of your effort goes towards knowing that there's the flip side to that every time.
Exactly.
It gives you a little bit more context, right? It gives you like a little bit more, some more fine-grained.
You won't be whipsawed around, you won't be whipsawed around by people telling you you're arrogant. Okay, and then you back off.
Like that, no, you're like,
Or,
I can't be. I check myself on the arrogance thing, like.
No. That I'm suggesting something different here, which is, yes, I'm arrogant. Am I too arrogant for this situation? Am I not arrogant enough? That is, I no longer hear those words as stinging whips. They're not cudgels. People can't bully me with them anymore. But it's not because I'm over the question of whether of arrogance. I'm very much on the question of arrogance. I'm just trying to figure out how, arrogance is a pejorative word for self-assertion.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that anybody who accuses you of being arrogant as though they are the foremost authority on who's arrogant is actually making a fairly arrogant move there. It's very arrogant to claim to be the judge of who's arrogant.
I mean, especially like, I'm sorry, but in your area, in the UC Berkeley area, I mean, it just must be like there's arrogant assholes everywhere, right? Like that's
yeah. No, there certainly are.
I mean, but they're everywhere. It's not just there.
I don't know
it's
many
kind
of them.
Rude statement.
This is a sweet town that way. I mean, to give you an example, my next door neighbor half the year is this year's Nobel Prize winner in literature, and we go out to dinner every
Congratulations
week when she's
Jesus.
Here. And no, she's not arrogant at all. She's a normal human being. She likes Schitt's Creek. She likes the TV show Schitt's Creek.
Yeah,
she's a normal person. Yeah. So there are other places where you'll find, I think, a bit more arrogance than you'll tend to find in Berkeley. But no, it's everywhere. And anyway, I was just arguing that how arrogant to be is a really interesting question. How self-assertive to be. And I'm much more interested in the question. I think of the formulas or the answers to these moral formulas as failed attempts to resolve tensions or dilemmas that we're all dealing with lifelong. I've gotten a whole lot out of the Serenity prayer, not the God part of it, but just that we're trying to cultivate the wisdom to know the difference between when to be self-assertive and when to be not self-assertive. I've written probably 35 variations on the Serenity prayer for dealing with the dilemmas we're all dealing with as living beings. We're all trying to figure out, I think of it very much as driving a winding road that is being built as we travel it. So I gotta watch both sides of the road. I could die off either side of it, or I could fail off either side of it. I can't just try to avoid one side. I'd end up crashing on the other side. And the road is winding. So if someone tells me that, so the virtue maximizing is like, when someone says love is the answer, that's basically like saying, like a backseat driver telling you, the way to drive the winding road is to steer your steering wheel all the way over to one side and keep it there. That's just not how you drive. Nobody lives like that, not even the backseat driver. Yeah. No one does that. We try to figure out, when to assert ourselves, when not to assert ourselves, that sort of thing.
That's cool. The Serenity prayer, you mentioned that. I'm not really familiar with that.
It's a big deal out here. It was coined by a German American, Reinhold Niebuhr, and even though I'm not religious, I have admired his work. He's good. He's deep on the subject of irony, and he coined it. It goes, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it got really popular. They say it at AA meetings, all the time. So it's a popular thing, and I actually think it's deep, and because it lays out the two sides of the road. That is, you gotta watch out not to be overly courageous or overly serene. You don't want to be pig-headed. You don't want to be wishy-washy. The Buddhist school, the whole Sam Harris school, convince yourself that you're not a self, that whole thing will tend to be much more about the serenity side of things. It makes appeals to that side. I think both sides need to be there. And the fact that it says, it's basically a quest for better wisdom to notice the difference between situations that call for more serenity or more courage to try to change things.
To cultivate that wisdom, right? To cultivate this wisdom so that you can better recognize the difference between the things that I cannot change and the things that and the things that I can change.
Yeah, that's right. So it's when to use which move.
Yeah, it's fine grained. It's a little bit more. It's a little bit more fine grained. It's a little deeper way of thinking about it.
Then because there are schools that say always be courageous. There are schools that say always be serene.
Yeah.
There's schools that say there's a time to be courageous. There's a time to be serene. That's cool. But the Serenity prayer goes a step further and says that you are actually going to spend your life trying to get better at reducing the times when you are serene when you should be courageous, or courageous when you should be serene.
Yeah.
So when I was teaching psychology, I'd always have the students, remember a time when they accepted something that in fact they should have tried to improve, and a time when they tried to improve something that they should have accepted. Everybody can think of them. I mean, it's obvious. We all have those experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, you know what I'm going to do is in the show notes, I'll just put links to everything. But
okay, sounds good.
Just the name of the podcast again was, I have it here. It's What's Up with Assholes?
Yeah, What's Up with Assholes, Advanced Psycho-proctology for Beginners. I've got two other podcasts. One is called Negotiate with Yourself and Win, which is just me debating me. It's
Nice.
a podcast between Jeremy Sherman Ph.D. and Jeremy Sherman GED.
Nice.
And the GED guys got it right plenty. I mean, it's just me debating myself. And then I have another one called To Name It Is to Tame It, terms for reading between the lines with greater comprehension. It's basically a word of the day thing.
Cool.
10-minute episodes. But there's just way too much of me on the internet. If you look up my name, Jeremy Sherman, you'll find lots. I have the website that's kind of a central repository for way too much of me. I've got two YouTube channels, one on the origins of life research, one on the psychoproctology research. I've written close to 1,000 articles for Psychology Today blog. So I should be easy to find. I'm probably the only guy using the term psychoproctology these days. And I'm accessible. I do a whole lot on Instagram these days because I kind of tend to write in bumper sticker length things. So memes are good for me. So I put out, I'm friendable on Facebook. It's easy to get as much of me as you want and even too much, but I appreciate that. I'm grateful. My favorite feature on Facebook is the show less and unfriend. That is, I don't want a captive audience. Yeah. I'm a fisher of men, but it's all catch and release. I don't,
fisher of men.
Pay attention to me if it's interesting. That's all.
Very nice. It was nice to meet you. I really appreciate the conversation, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah.
Really a pleasure.
Yeah.
Have me back any old time.
Yeah, I'll definitely hit you back up. I'm gonna check more of you out. So then when I come back, I'll have some more questions for you where I hit bumps in the road, maybe.
I thought you did a great job, just for the record.
Yeah, it's nice. Thanks, man. Okay, well then, yeah, goodbye, huh?
Oh, yeah, take care.
All right, thank you very much.
I'll be the same.
I'll be the same. Bye-bye.